Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Walz wins independence over Vance in debate, but will that help in 34 days? Iran's missile barrage calculated to be more bark than bite. Yet Israel continuing to gear up to ratchet up war tensions. This as Israel kills at least 50 in Gaza, in a Gazan orphanage, mostly women and children, and bars the UN Secretary General from entering Israel. Hurricane Helene death toll now at least 166, 100 still missing. White House backs longshoreman strike on day 2. For maybe a disturbing reason, frankly. Emerson poll, Trump-Harris tied in Pennsylvania, Trump up in Arizona, virtually tied in North Carolina. I should say Harris up in Arizona. Trump up in Arizona. Sorry. Grace period for student loan payments is now over. 18th day of the Boeing strike as machinists risk losing their paid health care.
Another reason why it shouldn't be tied to employment.
And New York Mayor Adams hits the last refuge of a guilty man, accuses prosecutors of leaking investigation details. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. It's
Hump Day.
Hump Day.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is Hump Day. Breaking format a little bit. Generally, we have a couple of interviews on this day, but we want to recap the vice presidential debate. It's going to be the last debate that we see. It really is, in many respects, going to be the last time a significant portion of the electorate will see either one of the members of the two tickets make their case to the American public. I mean, we've never had something that's been so truncated. I mean, and it was really not even a function of Biden dropping out and Harris being there. Like usually between the conventions and the election, you have at least two presidential debates. And at least one vice presidential debate. I just don't know in our modern era if we have had less debates than this.
And Trump is claiming that it's too late to have another debate, but we know that there were multiple October debates, both that he had with Hillary and that he had with Biden. So he's sick of debating, and he's enjoying, I guess, pulling the media around by and teasing them by not having another debate or something like that. I'm not sure.
I think it's something different because he just dropped out of a 60-minute interview, which would have been, again, national scrutiny, right? It is actually not that easy to see Donald Trump speaking these days, unless you're, a political junkie. But if you're on 60 Minutes, then, the normies see you. And I think the calculation that the Trump campaign has made, and we'll talk about this debate in a moment, but I think, we saw a different J.D. Vance than we've been seeing for weeks. I think the calculation the Trump campaign has made is that Trump cannot campaign to the entire country because it's going to cost them.
Yeah.
The idea is he needs to stay with those group of people who are already somewhat inclined to support Trump and get them to the polls. So when he goes and does a rally and he's only on Newsmax or RBN or whatever that is, he's reaching the people he wants to reach. He doesn't want to reach the people who are maybe even in the middle.
But it's funny because this is the strategy of Biden in the basement that they were making fun of in 2020. Like, the Harris campaign should be using this opportunity to take that media vacuum and go on a bunch of television shows. Apparently, Walz is making the rounds in the coming days after the debate. Finally, they're unleashing him, I think, on he's doing some national programs and some podcasts and things like that. But if that's
he's doing
the case,
a podcast, though, that's the thing is that we need to see which podcast. But I actually think that this is, part of the problem with the debate last night was that they don't realize what I'm afraid that the Trump campaign realizes, which is that this is not a persuasion election. This is a mobilization election. That
agreed on that point, and Vance was able last night to look more moderate when he was able to articulate the Republican message without having to just clean up Donald Trump's messes. So they're trying to avoid that situation.
Exactly.
Right.
He wasn't out there. He was there out to stench the bleeding, but not necessarily to get any votes. And here is this is what the concern is. This is not directly related to the debate, but it is, I think, indicative of a campaign strategy that the Harris-Walz campaign is following. That I think what we saw in the debate last night was a function of a strategy that I'm concerned about. Obviously, I mean, this is a tight race. But this is a thread from Representative Ruha Roman. She was the state rep from Georgia whom Uncommitted was hoping would speak at the convention. She is a Palestinian American.
State rep from Georgia.
State rep from Georgia. And you'll recall that her speech that she, released after the fact was really... I don't want to say tame, but it was not in any way controversial. And she is I would just say, and I don't know her personally, but from what, I've read and followed of her a little bit, she is a progressive Democrat.
Who is voting for Harris.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, like a
loyal Democrat.
A progressive partisan Democrat.
Right.
And this is what she had a really interesting thread. It reminded me of what we were talking about was the problem with Biden relative to the issue of what's going on with Gaza. Let's break this down. She's responding to what's going on in Michigan and Georgia. First and foremost, if Trump wins, it's going to be because white voters continue to vote for him. The other side of the coin is if there's a softening in our coalition, we lose. What does that mean? Time and time again, we've shown in Georgia and elsewhere that Democrats win when we expand our coalition. Yes, that means we have to care more about more issues, but the basic ask of voters in our coalition is, quote, we not hurt them. Now, when she talks about expanding our coalition, she's not saying about attracting Republicans. This is there's a basic, understanding that elections over the past several cycles have been about negative partisanship and that you gain more traction in getting voters who are not necessarily completely zero propensity voters, but low to mid propensity voters, and you mobilize them, they already are leaning towards you. You don't necessarily need to persuade them too heavily. You just need them to be able to say it's worth it coming out and voting for the person that you sort of lean towards. Now, understand, these are, politically speaking, no one in our audience is representative of this. Like we all, even the people who are like, I'm not voting for Harris, who might be in our audience, are doing so with a considerable amount of thought.
Right.
Time after time, we've shown in Georgia and elsewhere, Democrats win when we expand our coalition. The ask of our voters in our coalition is, quote, we not hurt them. Then from there, help make things better. Seems fair. In order to defeat the GOP, we have to turn out historically excluded groups to outnumber Republican voters. Because she's in Georgia now. When our policies kill people's loved ones, we risk our ability to win because they leave our coalition. It doesn't mean they vote Trump. It simply means we have less votes. The Republicans keep their numbers the same, though. That's why Trump's polling doesn't move. For the Republicans to win, they don't have to convince people to vote for them. Just convince enough people in our coalition not to vote.
Right.
The easiest way for them to do that is Biden's inability to see Arabs as people and his enablement of the displacement of mass killing of loved ones. This violence is so unpopular, it's why Biden's numbers cratered among Black, brown, and young voters. When Harris became our nominee, our numbers among Black, brown, and young voters shot up. The excitement was real. Then came the platforming of the Republicans, quote, at the expense of those who have been in our coalition. It's not a quote, it's an asterisk. She's trying to emphasize that. Suddenly, the softening was back. Not to mention Harris not breaking away on Gaza. In close swing states, this means every group can rightfully claim the inevitable loss and the importance of their issue. The difference on Palestine, though, is it's become a symbol of what voters hate about government. It includes everything from them hating war to money in politics after the primaries to elected officials ignoring public opinion. And here's the big thing, in my estimation. And the advocacy groups we need to turn out voters are struggling, both due to a dip in funding and because they care about this. They're anti-war. They feel like their policies are being ignored, and their volunteers also feel the same. They turn out voters and volunteers. We need volunteers to turn out voters. Volunteers come from a coalition that cares about this. It's depressing efforts, etc. And you can say, well, they're idiots because Trump is not going to be better.
Right.
And I happen to think that Trump is not going to be better. Trump is going to be worse on this issue. But the fact is that when you say they're idiots, they're fools, they're ridiculous, whatever, Trump's going to be better, you are you are both acknowledging a reality and refusing to address it. And you can make the argument that Trump is going to be worse, but it increasingly gets harder and harder to do just because one is a theoretical argument and the other is we're just looking at it. Now, do I think Harris, I happen to think that Harris has very, very little influence over our foreign policy at this moment. In fact, I would put it close to zero. However, she does have influence over her own campaign.
Yes.
And she does have influence over, what she can offer theoretically in the future.
And she could break from Biden on this point, which is what we've been saying she's going to have to do at some point. She may not. And then we're in a very precarious situation. We may be too late for that to have resonance, especially as this war expands in the Middle East. It just is a portrayal of chaos, I think, to people, and depressing with these exact voters that she describes. Like, Biden is an unpopular lame duck. There's a point where Harris needs to basically throw him under the bus to a certain degree, because we also know from the reporting in Politico that it's basically Brett McGurk and that other guy, what's his name?
The former IDF soldier.
Former
Hochstein?
IDF soldier. Yeah, Amos. Rothstein?
Amos Hochstein.
Hochstein. That they're basically running the show in this regard. Like Biden, it's insensitive to talk about, but he's clearly in decline, and he's basically allowed these national security ghouls to take the reins on this policy. And it's also something Biden clearly has no problem with ideologically, but I also think there's a power vacuum here, and they're taking the reins. And like, if Harris wants to maximize her chances for victory, this is for her own self-interest as well. She needs to differentiate herself, because like, what's the value of constantly saying I'm in the situation room all the time to build up her credentials when the results from said situation room are deeply unpopular with voters? So like, she's being taken seriously. That's done at this point. Now articulate something different, because we can't continue to go down this path.
You could argue that if she breaks from Biden, it's going to somehow look bad. We can test this theory at least with one policy. Yesterday, she broke with Biden on marijuana.
Yep.
It didn't get much attention. Now, would it get more attention if she came out and said, we have to reevaluate our providing weapons to Israel based upon, the civilian casualties? If she said, like, when I get into office, we need to follow the law.
Which is what Warren and Ro Khanna have been suggesting that she do, and Ilhan Omar, for that matter.
And so she has the ability to do that. I mean, people are saying, like, isn't it Biden's campaign infrastructure? It may be, but it's not. But I would bet that the vast majority of this infrastructure, the campaign infrastructure, also support the U.S. being more judicious, whatever you want to say, restrict weapons to Israel. I mean, on some level, she can be, what do you call it? Somewhat vague on this, but it needs to be a clear change in policy. A change in strategy.
I wanted to read this just briefly. This is from a month ago, or actually 6 weeks ago in CNN. That apparently this argument, I think, won the day. 3 weeks into her presidential run was the first time Biden's campaign pollsters, now hers, held a deep dive call with Kamala Harris's inner circle to discuss what she's been saying on the stump. Over the line came a lot of praise, but also some suggested tweaks. First, said veteran Democratic numbers man Jeff Garin, summarizing their analysis, "Stop saying we're not going back. It wasn't focused enough on the future," he argued. Secondly, lay off all the weird talk. Too negative. Harris's advisors listened. They considered the arguments. They decided to stick with what the crowds were chanting in the arenas. That was August 18th. No, they haven't stuck with that. The point is that over the past few weeks, they have been just focusing their entire attention on moderate Republicans, on older voters, on suburbanites, and they're trying to do no harm with white men. That's basically what this campaign strategy has been. But they haven't run up the numbers with non-college educated white men. And to this point with the base, this whole...
They're bleeding some.
They're bleeding some. So this summary of the Biden campaign pollsters who are now hers saying that they didn't listen to her, it seems like they listened to them. It seems like they have now, and they're running a very conservative prevent defense campaign. In the end, it may be enough, but I think that there are serious concerns about the strategy over the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I think part of that is was on show in the debate last night, and we'll get to that in just a moment. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. Somebody wants to know on the IM here, who's it? Buckets and Buckets wants to know what percentage of your audience, excluding the Thursday crew, are not going to vote for Harris. Well, the Thursday crew is not in the audience.
Also, I'm voting for Harris. But I'm quite clear about that.
What percentage of the audience? I have absolutely zero data on this. I mean, I would imagine it's quite small. Or at the very least, let me put it this way. In a swing state, I would imagine it's quite small. In a non-swing state,
No, who cares?
It really doesn't. I don't know that it matters that much. This is great, actually. I know, if you're a parent, your kids have just gone back to school, you still have not normalized yet, right? Because they've only been going to school for like 3 weeks, at least on the in the Northeast. I don't know what it is. Sometimes kids go back to school in August. But schedules are still getting set. After school hasn't even started in Saul's school, and guitar lesson, whatever it is. The beauty of Factor, one of our sponsors today, is that you don't have to once you get into a rhythm, maybe it's easier to cook and have like a 45-minute lead time. Now, right now, I want to be able to say okay, we're eating in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So you can watch your iPad for 10 minutes and that's it. Factor sends meals to you that are never frozen. They are always fresh. They are fully cooked. They literally take 2 minutes in these new devices I've discovered called microwaves. You put it in there, literally it's 2 minutes long. All the meals are dietitian approved. You're getting the nutrition you need along with and their new menu has all of these fall, almost comforty food flavors. Want to thank Factor for supporting the Majority Report this fall. You've got a lot going on outside the kitchen. Keep your plans and turn to Factor. They deliver fresh, nutritious, chef-prepared meals ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Head to factormeals.com/majority50. That's majority 50. Use the code majority50, majority50, to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. Their fresh, never frozen chef-crafted meals make it easy to get the nutrition you need with a restaurant-like experience like you deserve. They even had, I had a Indian tofu dish, which is nice. There's introduced salt, some other spices. I mean, he's had Indian food before. I had a chicken thigh dish with spinach and mushrooms. I had to get rid of the mushrooms for salt. It's all right. And a tortellini with cheese and kale. I mean, delicious. These things are amazing. Factor offers 35 wholesome meals every week, including Gourmet Plus, Keto, Calorie Smart, Vegan, and Veggie. I think I just go with the family or the chef one. So you always find something you love that suits your lifestyle. There's more to Factor than just lunches and dinners. They also have easy breakfast and smoothies and midnight snacks. Factor has over 60 add-ons to keep you fueled and focused 24/7 with a plethora of flavors. You're never going to get bored. Head to factormeals.com/majority50. Use the code majority50. Get 50% off your meals in your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code majority50 at factormeals.com/majority50. Get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube description. Also, next sponsor also helps feed my family. And this does come frozen, but it's for my cat, and it's real food. Smalls. It is time to make kibble a thing of the past. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients that you'd find literally in your fridge. It is delivered right to your door. That's why veterinarians.org rates Smalls 10 out of 10 for ingredient quality. Smalls was started back in 2017 by a couple of guys. They were home cooking cat food in small batches for their friends. A few short years later, they've served millions of meals to cats across the U.S. One of my cats passed away. We now have the ability to feed the other cat. We can leave the food out.
Right.
Because my other cat was vicious in terms of eating everybody's food. And he's been a little bit depressed, tough to get him to eat. Smalls has been really a big boon for him because he loves the food. Might be asking yourself, why can't I feed my cat kibble? Well, your kitty descended from ferocious desert cats who hunted live prey for food, and your cat isn't different. They still need fresh, protein-packed meals to be at their best. Cat brands know this, but they'd rather put in filler. They'd rather put in preservatives because it saves them money. There you go. After making the switch to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported overall health improvements, and that's a big deal. The team at Smalls is so confident your cat's going to love their product, you can try it risk-free. That means they're going to refund you if your cat won't eat their food. This is a no-lose proposition. Now's the time to make the switch to Smalls. Head to smalls.com/majority. Use the promo code majority at checkout, 50% off your first order, plus free shipping. It's the best offer you're going to find, but you have to use my code majority, 50% off your first order. One last time, that's promo code majority, 50% off your first order, plus free shipping. And their insulation is water soluble. It just will evaporate. It's like compostable. So check it out. We will put this in the YouTube and podcast description. Okay, let's get back into this. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. If you want the free show, free of commercials, become a member, join themajorityreports.com. Also, check out our AM Quickie. Yesterday, I showed a press release from one of our former AM Quickie writers, who is now a wage enforcement officer with the National Labor Relations Board down in New Orleans, and had his first recoupment of like $100,000 plus for a bunch of workers in a restaurant chain.
Love that.
I saw Bob down in New Orleans. It was great. So check it out, amquickie.com. It's free 3 days a week. All right, let's go through the debate we saw last night. With a little bit of time to catch up to this. Let's just start off with the first question, which was a ridiculous question, I thought.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. They opened the debate about what the question was like, would you authorize a preemptive strike on Iran from Israel?
This was like...
Are you joking?
I guess the idea was like, we want to see, who can answer the phone at 3 a.m. type of thing.
When Jeremy Corbyn was running, they did a thing like, would you allow like a nuclear first strike from the UK, or like, it's like, why these are insane questions, like mutually like destructive, apocalyptic questions that to prove you're serious.
And they know they're starting off with Walz, who is the governor of Minnesota and is clearly going to be the most uncomfortable in this particular setting. He, unlike Vance, didn't pivot to say, I want to do an opening statement. Vance didn't even answer the question at the outset. He talked about his background.
And Mima.
And Walz struggled, which was
it.
the same thing that the media, or that the CBS, no, that was CBS, sorry. What was
ABC.
The ABC moderators at the Kamala Harris-Trump debate did, where they didn't give her an opportunity to introduce herself in an opening statement. So, which is a tough, I think, position for the campaign, because they are more unknown than Trump, obviously. He's a known quantity, so.
Let's play this.
Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump.
Pause it. I should say he pivots at this point after, the first ridiculous question to reminding people one fundamental point. Now, Biden has failed to get back into the Iranian nuke deal, but it is always a challenge when one person or one entity unilaterally drops out of an agreement. The bar to get back into that agreement is higher, because you've got to go back to your constituents and say, and whatever those constituents are in Iran, we should get back into this, even though they're not, they basically scuttled their end of the bargain.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance.
All right.
I liked his defense of the Iran nuclear deal, by the way. Haven't heard that from Harris, but Phil Gordon is expected to stay on as her national security advisor if she becomes president, and he was a negotiator on the Iran deal. Again, this is some of the stuff why I have a more optimism about her positions on the Middle East. I would much prefer the Obama crew who negotiated the Iran deal than these ghouls that Biden has appointed. So that was a strong answer in my view.
The problem with his answering, and I think this is like indicative of I mean, I think like it feels like he executed the strategy that came from the campaign.
Yes.
But I just question it. You don't call Donald Trump fickle. Like, I get it. He's Midwest nice. But you don't call Donald Trump fickle. You got to be a little bit more pointed. You know, everybody running around, if everybody comes around with like the feeling like Donald Trump is fickle on foreign policy, I just don't know if that's enough for what you need to do. You need to say Donald Trump is, you want to say fickle once, that's fine. But you got to say then we don't need unstable leadership. We don't need inconsistent. We don't need flying off at the handle. Like, though, you need to sort of tie it in more to the way that people actually think about it. I can assure you there is no, and you know, how many times did we see like, you know, I like Donald Trump. Sometimes the tweets get a little bit much. They're not saying his tweets are fickle. Sometimes he goes off the handle and you need to tie in those reservations that people have about Donald Trump into the implications of that. In this instance, a nuclear armed Iran, let's say. It's not fickleness. It's instability. It is, instability is really the word I would use. In that respect, this is like thematically what I think was left on the table. That question did not hurt Walz. And we have polling, we'll talk about this well. Walz did fine, but there was a lot left on the table in this last opportunity to make a case to the American public.
Yeah, I mean, it's disconcerting to see that Vance's favorables went up, but it's hard for me to assess. The numbers look better than I anticipated. This was our analysis last night. If they're trying to win over people by not being as inflammatory and agreeing all the time, that clearly was the campaign strategy. And then he's polling better with independents than Vance. So I don't know what to say about it. The goal is to win.
But the goal ultimately wasn't to beat Vance in this. The goal is to make people not vote for Donald Trump.
Well, he mentioned Donald Trump a million times.
Yes, he did.
And Vance tried not to.
I'm just saying that, like, you don't want people walking away going, Donald Trump is fickle. You want people walking away going, Donald Trump is unstable. Donald Trump, if you're not going to say the word weird is not the same as fickle. Weird is the same as unstable. Weird is unpredictable. Like, those are the words that you create a little more jeopardy. All right. I mean, this is nitpicky. I get it. But this is, we're doing a whole show on this. So who knows? This is one moment that I think is going to get some play. And it's hilarious. I tweeted about this and I got inundated by small right-wing accounts that were really upset at how CBS supposedly changed their rules. Now, CBS had said that they weren't going to fact check, at least in the context of like some news stories I saw, but they also supposedly were going to have a QR code up there the whole time, which they didn't do. They just had a QR code to some other like weird thing. So who knows what exactly the rules were in this regard, but also who gives a shit?
Right.
Like the idea that like we wouldn't do this debate if we weren't allowed to lie, which is, what the premise is amazing. But here is Walz. They're talking about, and we know, look, we have seen J.D. Vance has already admitted on live television that he made up the story about the cats and dogs in Springfield, Illinois.
He repeated a made-up story, but
He repeated it, but he said,
he said he made it up.
Oh yeah, no, he said, but I'm okay with that.
Right.
Here's Walz going in, and Walz doesn't go hard. Fortunately, at the very least, the CBS moderators said some tiny thing. This is the exchange about immigration.
What about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim, Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me
just... pause. Can we also just say...
Yes.
This commentator, the moderator, which one was it?
It was both Nora and Margaret did this.
Margaret
Brennan seemed to be a bit more trigger-happy with it.
Every time, maybe every time except for like 3 times.
I would love to see data visualization on how many times.
Every time Tim Walz stopped talking, she would say, and he would end his thing like he did there, and she would say, Governor, your time is up.
Sam, your time is up. Sam, your time is up.
I mean, it was crazy. It was weird.
It was so bizarre.
And I feel like somebody said to her, like, make sure you don't hesitate to say that his time is up. That way people feel like you're in charge of the debate. Like, some like old salty journalist was like, here's my advice for you. Always say your time is up, even when he's done talking. That way it sounds like you're controlling, you're being hands-on as a moderator.
I used to really upset my brother when he would do something like take his dirty glass to the sink. I'd say, once he had just finished doing it, I'd say, can you put your dish away, please? As if I asked him to do it. It was like some sort of mind trick.
Right.
First, the governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help.
They endorse that bill.
Most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you
Why
have
is
1
that?
minute to
Well, can you
respond.
pause that? I'm sorry. So there were little jabs. I mean, for the most part, Vance was trying to appear moderate. That's why he kept saying, I agree with you. I think, you know, I like some of the things she's proposed, but I don't think they're sincere. Whatever. You saw that Tim Walz was trying to do the same thing. So I think they both have similar internals about moderate voters. That's all I'm trying to say. But like, he had a few dog whistles that were very, very subtle still for the base in the debate, including that Harris needs to, quote, find her religion. That was one of them. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it's meant to indicate like, okay, so her mother is from India. Is she really a Christian? That's what they're gonna, I think, try to look at there. And then in terms of like Kamala Harris being insincere about the border, but Walz being sincere, why would you think that? Why would you try to make that distinction except to say that because she's a person of color that she's insincere about it? But keep going.
I think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame.
Pause it for a second.
Look,
now, we just had a comment from someone from Minnesota who's like, I'm enjoying watching East Coasters get annoyed, like maybe I do, this by how Minnesotans are so Minnesotan. When Walz says, you know, private equity buying up homes, you know, he could have turned to Vance and say, you know, guys like you hang out with, essentially, who are doing this may not be you, but you know, your profession, your former profession, like, you know, let the American public know that this guy is basically a finance capitalist.
Yeah.
And
he wanted to just allude to it and not
but he mentions it.
Yeah.
But he's too polite to actually sort of like put it on there.
This is the repeated pattern, which is he has to front load and give his first answer with, oh, actually, we're really tough on the border. All the border people love us. Look at how tough we are on the border. And then he can get to the actual thing that would resonate with real people, which is that for also the Iran deal thing. Like, he always had to front load it with like, oh, we support Israel's right to defend itself. The thing that actually American people want to hear is Wall Street. Who is a culprit for this housing thing? And why is it so hard to name them? Because they're not named, and JD's going to name them. It's the Haitians on temporary protected status.
You've got to have an alternate story, and you have an avatar of that alternate story sitting, you know, 6 feet to your right. And
Dan pointed out that he offshored, as part of one of his funds, offshored actual jobs to China. Like, this other thing should be top
we
of
lost
the page.
manufacturing jobs under Donald Trump, and we've added hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs under Biden. And Walz didn't really make that point that aggressively.
But he's not going after Vance at all, and he's saying this sort of like, you know, it's too ethereal. Like, if you're going to bring it up, make it land.
Yeah, hit him with it.
You're not talking to me, obviously. I know that story. I know what you're saying, but, you know, not many others do. But go ahead.
Buying up housing and making them less affordable. But it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status temporary protected status.
Well,
Nora?
Margaret, but
Thank you.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're
because
going to turn out of the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys weren't
economy,
going to
we're-
fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application
All right,
called
pause
the
it.
CBP.
Okay, I mean,
Whiner.
so he called them illegal. And now, like, he wants to come in and say, you know, like, you can't fact check me on that. I wanted to be able to say that they were illegal. And he whined about this. And, you know, at this point, I want Walz to say, and by the way, why did you insist on making a rule that there was no fact checking? I just think that's ridiculous.
Exactly.
I'm okay. You know what? If I'm Tim Walz at that point, I say I'm okay with them fact checking me. Will you be okay with that too? It's just let's make a pledge not to lie, and if we lie, they can call us on it. Like there's opportunities here where you can maintain that niceness, but you know, go after Vance, or just say, you know, or if you don't want to go after Vance because you don't want to be perceived as being, you say like, it is the case that we don't have a fact check because it was such a problem for Donald Trump at the last debate.
Yes.
You know, like you could do it that way.
But your point is, I think, like they both have, I think, similar strategies in the sense that they were trying to be amicable with one another. But it's not an analogous situation that they're in. J.D. Vance has very low unfavorables and needed to do this. To your point, if this was a more aggressive campaign, Walz had more to gain by being adversarial because he has built-in goodwill with favorables. Now, let's just be clear. We'll get to these numbers later. Both of their favorables went up after this debate. Something like Walz is like plus 36 in the CNN instant reaction, and Vance went from minus double digits to -3. So both grew, but you could have limited the ceiling for Vance by being more aggressive because of the built-in advantage from the favorability.
I want to also say that, you know, these are my reactions, and I am perfectly aware that their strategy was not to appeal to people like me. But the reason why we read that tweet thread from Rua Roman up front, both because it has to do with an issue that's really, I think, important to a significant portion of the Democratic base, but also because it understands, like, it is a theory about partisanship and electoralism in places like Georgia, where you cannot rely on that person living in the cul-de-sac who, you know, more often than not votes Republican, but really respects Dick Cheney, going like, hey, you know, this time around, I'm not going to vote for Trump. Maybe if they be persuaded. What you need to do is be able to get a greater number of that cohort that's already inclined to vote for you, 18 to 35-year-olds, people of color. That's what you want to drive out, just a couple of percentage more of them.
I agree. Democrats don't want to win that way, though. Like, I mean, in the sense that this is a standard Democratic campaign, and the standard Democratic consensus is exactly what we say. They're hyper-targeting moderate, older, suburban voters in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, somewhat in North Carolina, and in the Sun Belt as well. I think Georgia's probably lost, but we don't
Jeff
need to
Guerin, the pollster you mentioned that said, stop saying weird and then we're not going back. His review of Walz last night was really great job by Governor Walz tonight. His decency, compassion, and common sense really shone through. So he got what he wants. So.
Yes, I mean, but you know, the problem is that like Walz can be very popular and people can still vote for Donald Trump. That's the problem.
Right.
Here is another topic where I feel like there was a huge liability that J.D. Vance had, which is, and I will sum it up, and you see if Walz communicates this. When you talk about creating different risk pools and making insurance cheaper for people who don't need as much. What you're talking about is raising rates for everybody eventually, making insurance more expensive because we're all going to get older. That's it. And
this answer by Walz, reportedly, the dialers, say that he shot up in this answer. There should be more focus on healthcare in this campaign. That is like a lesson from, I think, this response.
Problems facing Americans is the high cost of healthcare. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan.
Incidentally, that would mean that they bought Obamacare on the marketplace. It just so happened that Donald Trump was the president. That's true. But Obamacare would have been gone if Trump had his way.
And that marketplace, Trump slashed all outreach efforts to get people onto that plan.
Bottom line, we lost the number of Americans who are uninsured went up under Donald Trump. It went back down under Biden. But go.
I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. It's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation.
Not how the ACA
Donald
was
Trump
done
was
either.
actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of. Prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important
I'm sorry. Okay, so Donald Trump ran on appealing the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. That was and then he said, we're going to get rid of it. It's horrible. And I'm going to replace it with something much better. We're going to insure everybody. Like, he lied through his teeth in 2016 and co-opted that rhetoric because Hillary couldn't counter it with anything more populist. He signed on to a lawsuit to gut the ACA as well. And he cut into, as I mentioned before, right? Like, he slashed the budget to advertise the programs and made it much more difficult, and people lost insurance under Trump.
Okay.
Disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, More people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Let me just add one more thing to that. It's not just that the insurance company is going to pick who they want in a risk pool, right? We're just going to take younger people, healthier people, and you're going to be paying this rate. And then we're going to take people with pre-existing conditions or who we anticipate are going to get sick, and you're going to be paying this rate. Not only is that going to happen, and it makes the system unstable, first off, but if you happen to be 2 out of the 10 in the group that they anticipate who are going to be healthy, and you're not, you get hit by a bus. I'm 35 years old, but I got cancer. You're going to hit a annual cap, and you're going to hit a lifetime cap. And you're going to do that very quickly, and you're going to go into bankruptcy. That's what existed pre-Obamacare. You are able to target, as an insurance company, we're going to charge people who we anticipate being less risk this amount of money, and then we're going to charge more or deny coverage for people who are high risk. Now, instead of denying coverage, Vance is saying, oh, we'll let you have coverage. It's going to be extremely expensive because you're going to make up the difference between these two groups. But remember, if you're in that first group and you end up not being healthy, you end up being, 20% of all healthcare costs, 20% of people constitute 80% of healthcare costs. And you end up, just by the luck of the draw, being somebody who gets sick, that's when you're absolutely effed. And that's why you cannot go back to that.
Right.
The ACA was oversold in terms of how inexpensive it is. The only way to really get healthcare costs under control, the only way, is to make it all through a single payer insurance program. You want to call it Medicare for everybody, Medicaid for everybody, single payer health insurance. That's what you need. That's the only way to keep the costs down. But at the very least, the ACA made it impossible for you to buy junk insurance that you don't realize is junk until you actually desperately need it. All right, we got time for one more clip here in the free half of the show.
This is the answer that is immediately being cut up into campaign ads. The January 6th one, which unfortunately was at the back half of the debate. Walz's weakest points were at the beginning and his strongest were at the end. But this is important because it's a signifier for extremism, January 6th. And I think that's what resonates with independents. Over 60% of independents believe that Biden won the election in 2020. So reminding them of this is an indication, no, this side is extreme, and this is where I think they have their strongest strategy with moderate voters.
And when we're going to take a break after this one and go into the fun half. I've got to jump, but Emma will show that there are polls that indicate that this type of stuff right here really resonated with independent voters, and that seems to have been their strategy. And that's why you're going to see this clip over and over again. They're going to deploy this clip. They got their line
bite
for the night.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance, I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't.
Wait, keep going.
Yell fire in a crowded theater.
Wait,
that's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of
this
Facebook.
is where he should be going back. You haven't answered the question. I mean, he allowed Vance to change the topic.
Yeah.
When you say,
well, Vance is debate club bro, but he comes off sleazy. I mean, I understand the critique, but they got the bite.
Well, they got the sound bite, but I'm saying
don't let him change the subject.
Don't let him change the subject. Go wait a second. You didn't answer the original question. I told you my opinion about censorship, but you didn't answer the question about January 6th, about whether Donald Trump won the election.
But
That's
saying
bizarre.
In the same breath that this was something that did well with moderate voters, and then we're criticizing the lack of aggressiveness.
I'm criticizing the follow-up.
You could follow up that question because you can follow up that question.
I agree.
Because as soon as you let JD Vance make you answer his question again, you're conceding that we've moved on.
But we have to be conscious of the fact that this is not for us. That's the thing that I just feel like is.
But what I'm saying is they got to keep it for not us. The not us being reached was better when he said, "Do you believe that Trump won the election?" Than the not us being fire in a fucking crowded theater, but free speech. What are we talking about?
I agree with you. I wish
they
he
will
had
have
different
the clip.
responses.
They'll have the clip because they're just going to cut it where after he doesn't answer it. But I'm saying
this was all pointless after.
This could have been. This could have been. It just would have. It just was the proper way. I mean, in this instance, regardless of what your strategy is, the proper situation here is to go, well, JD, it sounds to me like you really don't want to answer that question.
He said there's a damning non-answer. He just said that.
I know, but then he allowed JD Vance to keep going, and he got into the weeds where he's actually refuting JD Vance's points. Why should Walz have to answer JD Vance's question 3 times and not the opposite? And so it is, Josh Marshall had this theory called the bitch slap theory. This is back 20 years ago about how when Republicans beat up Democrats and they don't in any way stand up for themselves, it is the subtext that's being communicated is, I won't stand up for you either. I can't stand up for me. You can't assume I'm going to stand up for you. And this is a situation where Vance is trying to, run roughshod. Now, it is true that we have that isolated thing there, and there is, that resonates with the sort of corporate mainstream media. That is the end all be all because it's the it's outside of the idea of ideological politics, right? Like this is an offense to America. This is not like, wow, you're really denying Americans health care or et cetera, et cetera. So this is a topic that resonates. But the subtext of like Walz is not going to get pushed around by J.D. Vance there, it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I hear you on that.
And he had the building blocks there. He said, like, I don't run Facebook. That was a good response to this, too. And also saying, like, the book bans, Ron DeSantis. So, like, don't talk to me about censorship. Don't get into, actually, we need some moderation and fire in a crowded theater. That is, especially, like, just mention the J.D. Vance dossier. Like, mention stuff like that, like censorship. Don't get into, like, oh, maybe we do need some. That's just not a smart position to be in for, I think, we need.
All right, let's just see, just to play out just a little more.
For saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this, I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you.
Again!
But that last thing that he said there, I have to say, I had forgotten that he did that. That was, I mean, I can get nitpicky about it, but that last line where he said, like, you just failed the test because we don't know if we can trust Donald Trump to, accept the results of the election. Now, last time Mike Pence stood up to him and you just failed the test, you just said, I don't think I'm going to stand up to Donald Trump. Right. And I mean, everything that Walz said there, Kamala Harris wouldn't have picked me if it wasn't the type of person who would say, I'm sorry, Madam President, you lost the election. Or I'm sorry, Madam Vice President, you lost the election. I mean, that's and
that's why people seem to think that this was his best answer for that reason. That's all I was really saying there.
Yes. No, that second part where he came back, he's hamstrung by the fact that he's like just an extremely congenial
person, and also
trying to find middle ground,
which of course I find almost offensive.
He's not a greasy lawyer. Vance comes off like as the guy in Debate Club, right? And I think that's how he came off in that response. So that's why I thought it was stronger. But overall, we're in agreement on this is not a maximizing strategy for the campaign, this do no harm situation. But we'll see how it plays out. The initial response to his performance was decent. It just he didn't hit Vance or in the way that he could have.
Okay, and I've got to jump, but we're going to head to the fun half.
Yes.
Emma is going to show you the reactions, and for all our nitpicking, the fact of the matter is that Walz came out of this debate up on Vance with independents by almost 16 points, which almost perfectly mirrors that notion of independents, in their perspective on January 6th. And, in my perfect world, a Democratic president wins on single-payer health care or on more anti-corporate domestic policy, the Supreme Court, and stopping aid to Israel. But they have a different strategy. And at the very least, whether the strategy is going to work or not, don't know. But they seem to have pursued it properly last night on their terms, and it gave them what they wanted. Hopefully that'll be enough. Just remember, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. Also, Just Coffee, the greatest coffee roaster in the country, probably. It's a co-op, and they take really good care of their suppliers and their farmers across the world. Fair trade, coffee, hot chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY, get 10% off. And you can get the Majority Report blend, ESVN, Emma, and I will say good day.
Happy Rosh Hashanah to Sam, and he's off. But on ESVN, we spoke a bit about... that's
for Rosh Hashanah.
Well, I just can't even.
Okay. On ESPN, we recapped week 3 in the NFL. We talked about Jaden Daniels. We talked about the Vikings being 4-0. Congrats to Matt. YouTube.com/ESPN show. And Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, gosh, we had a whirlwind of a day yesterday on Left Reckoning. We had Bronco Marchich on to talk about the suppression of the J.D. Vance dossier, which... Man, well, now that I think about it, Walls really should have mentioned that. But he's like, and for in the Midwest, we got a journalist, Ken Klippenstein, who
I would love Ken to have a shout out on the debate.
We talked about that, and we had a full show yesterday in between the two shows we did here in studio. So check that out, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920 is the number. We will call into the phone lines in the fun half. See you there.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the Majority Report.
Wait, whoa. Look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please. No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid. Tour. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I had this debate 7,000 times. A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid. Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like, I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job. Tour?
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour?
That's a real thing. That's a real thing.
Real thing. What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing.
That offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion. Real thing. That's
poker with the boys. That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour? Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, bro.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour,
deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now, shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best.
Violet tour?
Don't be foolish. And don't fucking tweet at me. And don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people. Love it.
That's where my heart is. So I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh.
Sorry.
She wrote an honors thesis.
Yeah.
I guess I I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I don't have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like, period.
We are back, folks. We will open up the phone lines in just a second, but I did want to, while we're still kind of moving forward, analyzing the debate, let's play these post-debate reactions that we have here. So which numbers are these, Bradley?
7 and 8 and 9, I believe, are the CNN. And
Yeah. Let's do that. So, we had some frustrations last night about Walz' lack of aggressiveness with J.D. Vance. Vance, for his part, was trying to appeal to the same kind of more moderate voters, right? And they both were very non-adversarial, congenial with one another, giving each other credit and things like that.
Both acting like they wanted to decommodify housing.